Welcome to Heaping Spoonful, a twice-monthly conversation with restaurateurs, chefs, growers, and others who have helped generate the legends associated with eateries across the Mid-South. The team at Benny Keith is proud to sponsor this adventure with the goal of preserving the stories that have helped cultivate an amazing food scene across the Mid-South. So kick back and enjoy a Heaping Spoonful.
Hello, everybody, and welcome to another episode of Heaping Spoonful. Our goal with this podcast is to share the stories of the Mid-South's top chefs, restaurateurs, with our listeners. Your host for spanning 5 decades. Yes, that's a mathematical possibility when it's only 2020, and I started in the late 80s. Most of that was doing restaurant reviews for Little Rock newspapers and magazines long before the internet was a thing, long before anybody who had an account could get on or had internet access could get on Yelp and TripAdvisor and tell people how they thought things were. Just a few of us had a chance to be official back in those days. And now, thanks to the folks at Benny Keith Foods Mid-South Division, I'm a podcaster. Today, I'm very happy to welcome Zach and Ed David, the proprietors of Faded Rose, truly one of the most iconic and beloved restaurants in Little Rock. So, welcome, gentlemen. Glad to have you here. Ed, you're a computer programmer by trade?
Well, I spent a number of years doing that. Most of it with the Army Corps of Engineers.
Okay. And so here you are. You're a native of New Orleans.
Native of New Orleans.
And loved the food and learned how to cook the food. And friends used to tell you, you know, Ed, you really ought to have a restaurant. And so for, moving in on 40 years, you have had one. So the Faded Rose neighborhood of Little Rock in 1982, is when you opened up in the Riverdale after months of getting the building ready. So what was the thought process? Why then? Why Little Rock? Why leave the job that you had to go do this?
Well, as I said, I spent a lot of time with the Army Corps of Engineers, but post-Army Corps of Engineers and prior Faded Rose, I was with Health and Human Services in the U.S. government. And I traveled the 5-state region. I was based in the Dallas regional office.
Okay.
And my 2 main states of responsibility were New Mexico and Arkansas.
Okay.
So I spent just about every other week, a few days during each week in either Arkansas or New Mexico.
Right.
I was reviewing what was going on. Using my background in computers, I would come in and, for instance, and go to Blue Cross Blue Shield and pull claim samples to make sure that their computers were paying claims properly.
Right. And meanwhile, you're looking around the restaurant scene in Little Rock, and I'm guessing that's late 70s into the very early 80s.
Yeah, well, we made the decision that if the political climate changed, and I don't want to get into politics, but if the political climate changed, that I was out of there.
Right.
Okay. And
out of the federal government.
Yeah, out of the federal government.
Right.
That I had my fill, and if it was going to do what it looked like, I was going to do something different.
Right.
And as I said, New Mexico and Arkansas, and predominantly Little Rock, were the 2 states. And so I started looking between those 2 states because I loved both of them. When we decided we were going to do something, it became an issue of, it was a no-brainer to come to Little Rock because of the tax structures of the 2 states.
Sure. Well, that's great. So obviously your confidence in your ability to create great food was strong and your culinary heritage was strong, but did you have any worries about the whole business side of running a restaurant, or did you figure you'd figure it out?
I figured I'd figure it out.
And you must. Did you immediately stop your day job, or did you continue to work while you opened the Faded Rose?
I just resigned from the federal government and said, see you later. And I moved up here and left my wife in Dallas. She was pregnant with Zach.
Right.
And start working on the building.
And was that building something else before?
I think immediately prior to us remodeling it had been a Venetian blind laundry.
Okay.
Okay.
About as different as you could.
Yes.
And so, as you said, one more, even more important influence in your life was born just a few months before the Faded Rose, and that's Zach Davis. So, Zach, you literally grew up at the, you had a house, you had a mom, you had a place to go, but you grew up at the restaurant.
Yes, there's no doubt about that. I grew up in that building.
Yeah. That's and I guess the customers and the cooks and the staff and were kind of your godparents, who helped bring you along the way.
In a lot of ways, yeah. I mean, some of my most vivid memories that we had a cook that my mom would bring me in the afternoons and would literally take ground beef and make me a hamburger steak in the shape of a helicopter or a horse and stuff like that, and that's what I would eat in the afternoons is things like that. Or out back we used to have a storage trailer, a 18-wheeler trailer that we kept all our dry storage goods back there because the building was small. We didn't have a lot of room.
Sure.
And it was a gravel parking lot back there, and I would throw rocks at that trailer at the side of the trailer because it made a cool noise. And it was the staff that got me on doing that. That's not something that a 5-6-year-old comes up with on their own. So.
Bad influences. So your Lori, wife and mom, was Faded. Has she been a Faded Rose employee? I mean, I don't even know her role in the business if she has one still or ever.
Oh, she still does every day. Yeah.
What is she responsible for?
She does a lot of the bookkeeping and office work.
So it is literally a family affair.
Absolutely.
Yeah. So, Zach, you grew up at the restaurant, grew up going to school in Little Rock, graduated, went to college at Lake Forest College, just outside Chicago. Mm-hmm. And I'm sure you had options when you got out of school with your degree. Did you know the whole time you were coming back, or did you just make that decision as you finished and said, what am I going to go do?
I think there's a lot of people kind of growing up, going through, school and college. I played ice hockey in high school, and that's what kind of got me into Lake Forest is because of their Division III program. And they were a good business school, and they were small, and that's kind of things I was looking for. Yeah. Now, when I got there, I ended up not playing hockey for school, not being a business major, but I enjoyed the school in the area so much that I ended up being a communications major, and so like most people, I kind of first few years had no idea what I was doing and just kind of took it day by day, and then slowly I remember senior year looking around and seeing all my friends and fraternity brothers kind of starting to freak out about what am I going to do with the rest of my life?
Sure.
And, I kind of think about it. I still don't remember who it was to this day. I was talking to somebody and they were saying, that's a really cool thing to be able to take over a family business and keep it going. And that kind of hit home. And I wish I remembered to this day who it was that said it. And I started thinking about it. I was like, you know what? There's a good thing there. And Little Rock's a great thing. And I'm, always been one of, I was home every summer working in the restaurant. I'd stay up there over the summers. And so, I just decided that, I think that, that's the direction I want to go. I've got the connections there, as far as in the community and everything. So yeah, just,
Yeah, that's cool. So besides the fact that you worked there for all these years and the summers and grew up there, so the influence of your work is obviously there, but is there anything else that you all do or don't do or serve or don't serve because you said, Mom and Dad, we probably ought to do this?
I'm sure there's, obviously, when you're there, I've been there full-time managing since, second half of 2004. So,
oh yeah. So you're,
there's definitely, fingerprints all over the place. And I think most of it's, just organizational systems, it's things like of that nature. I mean, I don't think you can sit here and point to a specific menu item.
Maybe some cold beers you wouldn't have had otherwise.
Now, when it comes to the bar, that's one thing that I've slowly been trying to change stuff. There has been some things that I've done specifically in there as far as bringing in more local craft beer, draft beer, stuff like that, used to, it was just a, domestic Budweiser, Bud Light, Miller Light.
That's what we had.
And that's what everything was. And now, all of our draft is all local craft. They did talk me into in the last 6-8 months to putting Bud Light back on there.
It's the leading selling beer in the world or at least in the United States.
Yeah. So, some of that, I think we're trying to progress with our bar program slowly but surely. I mean, we have so many, loyal regulars that they come in and we're a whiskey, vodka bar. It's like you come in, you get, we've got, I can look around the bar and know, who's got what and what they're drinking. And it's not, a craft cocktail.
I remember one time I came in to eat and I was by myself. And if I'm going to eat by myself, I like to sit at the bar. Well, I was in somebody's seat. I hadn't been there yet that day.
Right.
But people are like, that's kind of where he always says, like, well, just tell me what one is not already claimed and I'll move to that. But that's a beautiful thing. And, that's the lifeblood of your business right there. So, Ed, if all we talked about today was what's happened right there on Redmond Park Road, one address and then 2 numbers up when you move to the side, and we'll talk about that in a little bit. What an anchor the Little Rock restaurant scene for. And again, we're recording this just for posterity's sake in late June of 2020. And in May of 2022, you're going to be 40 years old.
Yeah.
Yeah, which is just, again, that's great. So if that was all the story, that'd be good. But there once was more to the Faded Rose empire. And most of our listeners, certainly I remember very well going to the Faded Rose West, which you opened in 1988. Tell me how that came to be.
That's an easy one. A gentleman by the name of Dennis Chunyo was my manager back then, and Dennis wanted to go out on his own, and
okay.
And quite frankly, we didn't have the funds to do it ourselves, so we licensed the West Little Rock store to Dennis.
And it went along 23 years.
And yes, and he eventually decided in about I can't remember the exact dates anymore, but.
Should have been in the early 2000s.
Yeah, maybe in the 2000s. He decided he was ready to retire, and he sold back.
Yeah, that had to have been in the mid '90s.
Okay, he sold it back to you.
Yeah, we took it back over.
You all ran it for a while.
Yeah, we took it back over, and it was mid '90s.
Yeah,
because that's where I worked most of the time growing up when I was 15, 16 years old. I worked there, and my best friend worked at the other one. It was kind of funny that.
Well, that's the thing when you got multiple spots. You can't be 2 places at once.
Exactly.
Divide and conquer. But that, and again, for people that are listening around Little Rock, remember that when in '88 when that opened up, that was a hot spot, and it just Little Rock gradually moved further west. And we've had Vince and Gio Bruno on the show, and of course they were right across the street there, but. Yeah. The kind of the shine came off of that part of the town. It was not as big a deal as it was before. And Buffalo Grill closed in there. Bruno's moved.
That's basically what happened. Everything just moved past us.
Yeah, it was a matter of 2 years where Bruno's closed first. We hung and then I think 6-8 months later, October 2011, we ended up our lease was due to renew. So it was kind of we had to make a decision.
Sure.
So and then I think it was the next year is when Buffalo Grill ended up closing.
Right.
So
that's just that's nature. And then I knew about Faded Rose Hot Springs. I did not make it there. I'd seen it, but there were other spots. Again, the internet tells all. I saw Texarkana, North Carolina.
Yeah,
same type deals where somebody wanted to.
Yeah, somebody. It was all a couple different stores. One, the Texarkana store was a place where we had a general manager at the time that he wanted to go out on his
same setup.
The North Carolina store they came to me. Somebody recommended the Faded Rose to him. I no longer can remember. And they wanted to do a franchise or licensed operation. So we worked with them, licensed it.
Sure.
Helped them get it open. And 6 months down the road, unfortunately, or maybe a year, they had changed it. They were younger. And they had an upstairs in the building they were leasing. And I happened to drive over there to see what was going on. And what was going on was they had put a music in a pool room above it.
Oh, wow.
And they were wondering why it didn't work.
Ask the people sitting downstairs not enjoying being downstairs with them.
So that's the story in North Carolina for me.
Right. Well, I was I got out of college in '81 and went to work at the Arkansas Gazette, and I spent a lot of time down in that part of the world because, again, people from around here remember that area was really the kind of the hot entertainment dining type place. That was the River Market before there was a kind of a river market area, and some of you guys are still there. I mean, Buffalo Grill's there, and but we had Shugs and Diego's and all those places down there, and it was fun. Shoot the Bull, which is where Loca Luna is now, and those places. But I also find it interesting that I've always assumed that you said, we like the layout of this building, we like everything about it, except it's too small. So you procured land next door and built the bigger version of the original Faded Rose, and now Maddie's Place is in there doing some pretty dadgum good food too.
Yes. Yeah, Brian does a nice job.
Yeah. And was that the case? You just needed more room in a newer building?
Yeah, we needed a little more room. We needed more storage.
You didn't have to have the 18-wheeler out.
We didn't have to have 18-wheeler.
Exactly.
Yeah.
Right.
But that's what precipitated that. And the interesting thing about it, you've been in both buildings. In Little Rock, you don't change too fast.
Right.
And that was the thing when our customers realized we had plans to build that building.
Right.
They said, well, it's got to look like this one.
Yeah.
And I think we did a pretty good job.
Oh, you did a great
of replicating the original restaurant.
It's just wider and a little more.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah,
a little wider. We got more storage. We got the downstairs for storage.
Bigger kitchen.
Right.
And you know what? It's never big enough.
Nope.
Oh, I'm sure. Everybody's still on top one there. All right. Well, listen, thank you guys so much. We're going to take a short break here on Heap and Spoonful, and we're going to be back in just a minute with Zach and Ed David of Faded Rose.
I hope you're enjoying this episode of Heaping Spoonful. We at Benny Keith Foods enjoy talking about the food scene almost as much as we enjoy providing the top quality ingredients that help restaurateurs and chefs across the Mid-South create their magic. Now let's dive even deeper into the culinary world with your host, Kelly Bass.
Welcome back to Heaping Spoonful, everybody. Thanks for listening today. Our guests are Zach and Ed David of the Faded Rose, a legendary restaurant in Little Rock, Arkansas. So guys, when doing my exhaustive research, being the recovering journalist that I am, I looked at your menu, which I've seen many, many times over the years. And, it really has a nice feel of if it ain't broke, don't fix it. I mean, I think you all call it traditional Creole comfort food. But I looked down the list and my mouth is literally watering right now. I mean, red beans and rice and that great sausage, and I love that you don't cut the sausage up and put it in the red beans. I like to be able to do that on my own. The soap salads, which my wife can't not have. The gumbo, the barbecue shrimp, which people who don't know what barbecue shrimp is, it's the New Orleans style barbecue shrimp. It's not barbecue sauce. Po' boys on Leidenheimer bread, the only way to fly at lunch, burgers, and of course cheese dip, because if you're not from Arkansas, you don't know. You better have some queso on the menu, and every restaurant worth its salt that's of a general nature. I don't think they have it at the Asian restaurants, but it's Arkansas and all. But you're also known as one of the very best steak restaurants in town. And I looked, you have 11 different steak options on your menu. So tell us when I think of New Orleans, I know they have steaks. I don't think about steak. But how did you all decide that steak was going to be a big deal at the Faded Rose?
It was, if you want to know the truth, it was the easiest way I could come up with to learning about the business is by having it at that point, in the beginning, having it dominated by the steaks.
Okay.
Because I knew if we bought the best quality beef and prepared it the way we did, in New Orleans, that people would like it. I had no doubt in my mind that they would like it. And so we went that direction while I learned the business, quite frankly.
Right.
Yeah, we had
interesting.
We had about a 10-item menu in the early years.
It's funny to look back and look at that little menu, and then where we are now. It's a big difference.
Yeah. Oh, I know. It is, because again, but it steaks. I mean, again, you can't like a burger. I mean, a certain percentage of your meat eating population, which is the predominantly largest chunk of the population, steak and burger, you can't go wrong. But again, there's places that offer steak that aren't known as a steak place. And while you obviously are known as a Cajun Creole New Orleans restaurant, you ask anybody on the street the best steak in town, and it's a certain percentage of them are going to say Faded Rose. So I think that gets back to buying the good cut of meat and cooking it right.
Yeah, and you got some options with our steaks, because of the different sauces, and that's where the New Orleans part comes in.
True.
I mean, you got Charlie's Steakhouse up by Pascal Manali's, which is one of the best steakhouses in New Orleans, and that's where Ruth's Chris started.
I didn't know that.
Yeah, Ruth's Chris Steakhouse is in New Orleans. Broad Street, yeah, it's on Broad Street in New Orleans.
Okay, cool. Well, that's cool, but you have again, you talked about the days of the small menu. You have a large and varied menu because you got a lot of fish, which is very New Orleans. You got redfish and other good fish preparations that are very New Orleans, and then you got chicken, you got pasta, you got a lot of things. I would imagine there are certain things that if you took off the menu, that people would revolt. I mean, you wouldn't do it because you're not stupid, but and I'm sure some of that's the steak, some of the classics, the red beans and rice, the po' boys at lunch, those kinds of things. Are there? I mean, what are the things that people clamor for that come in and order more than anything else at Faded Rose?
I mean, obviously, I think you can go to the salad right off the bat. I think soaked salad is something that's has a very big following. I think that our the gumbo. I think that's one of those things that we get a lot of comments for. And now that the shrimp and grits that we do, which is done a little differently, that's not necessarily something you're going to go down. I feel like that's the one dish that we have on our menu that kind of goes against the traditional New Orleans steaks and seafood and stuff that we do. Is that, and that was more of one trying to do it. In a way that we could get the food out and in a way that we knew was going to be consistently good. And I think it was I don't think we were going out looking to do a spin on something, but it turned out that, it seems like that dish hadn't been on our menu as long as it has sometimes.
Right. Well, I remember when it kind of became a thing, but I know I haven't had it at Faded Rose, but it sounds like you may do it a little bit of a different style, just so you can ensure the quality when it comes.
Yeah. So we don't do the loose grits. It's a grit cake that we do. So we cook the grits a little harder, and then we take them, cool them down, and then bread them and fry them, and then do the sauce with the shrimp.
I think I know what I'm having next.
So it's a little different. It's not your traditional. Especially not your traditional, Carolina low country kind of shrimp and grits.
No, it's more of quite frankly, more of a Southwest Louisiana
type
dish. The foundation and the taste.
And then I guess other items, as you say, your menu's a lot larger than it used to be. So I guess it just, as it made sense to expand, you've just
and I think
some different things.
One good story is frog legs. So back.
Yeah.
I don't know exact year. It's probably, we put them back on in the last 3 or 4 years, but we took them off for a few years, and because they just weren't selling. I mean, people weren't buying frog legs, and all of a sudden, so we kept getting, we get requests, and you get the occasional person that would come in from out of town and say, "Oh, I always used to come in town for these," and so after a few years, we brought them back on, and now, we're selling them. It's more than we did prior to taking them off, and even years before that. So it's one of those things. Sometimes you just got to take it away for a little bit.
Sure, but I'm with you. A product like that, you can't just keep it around forever. People aren't ordering it. Well, that leads us to another subject, which I know is near and dear to y'all's heart, which is crawfish. And I guess it's almost always, or maybe it's always Wednesday, is crawfish day, and so I'm not knowledgeable about the crawfish industry to know. How many months a year is it viable, assuming the weather's decent and things are normal? How is that? Is that a 8 months? 9
it's typically.
months?
It's a springtime
January
kind of deal.
through May is the big availability.
And how much of that do you go through? I guess another thing, you got to know sort of what you're going to sell before you cook it, because you don't want to have it.
Yeah, and that's part of the reason why we do it just on Wednesdays and do them. It's kind of more. We've always done it as more of a special thing. It benefits us doing it middle of the week. That it kind of brings in business when we potentially wouldn't otherwise have.
Sure.
And, we'll do, we always start on Fat Tuesday, which is kind of, obviously it's a moving target. So it kind of changes every year. But it gives us a good, everybody kind of knows this is when it's going to be. And, we'll do that first one. We'll do somewhere between 200 and 300 pounds.
Wow.
And then it just dials back every Wednesday from there.
That's a lot of cooking and a lot of, It's labor intensive to cook and labor intensive to eat, but it's worth it for sure. So, I was talking about customer revolt possibility if you pulled something off the menu, but and I mentioned earlier, I mean, you have so many regulars, which if you were just relying on people who were popping through town, they wouldn't be there, they wouldn't find you.
Yeah, especially in that neighborhood.
Yeah, but I mean, so is it a pretty high percentage of people who come in there who you say, oh, I know you? I mean, you know people.
Totally.
Yeah,
for sure.
Yeah.
And if it's not, I know their name. I at least know what they eat or what their drink order is typically, or something.
And recognize it.
And that goes with our staff as a whole.
Yeah.
There's bourbon and water.
Yeah. Know what you mean. Well, I've again been there dozens and dozens of times, and one of the regulars that I used to see at the bar, a regular who has left us, a fairly quiet man unto himself, was Charles Portis, the legendary author of True Grit, Norwood, and other novels, who lived just a few hundred yards away there at River Cliff.
Yes.
And so his brother Jonathan, younger brother Jonathan, and I worked together at the Arkansas Gazette, and I've remained friends, and he stayed a lot with his brother in his final years. Yeah. But was he a pretty regular cat?
Oh, very regular.
Very.
Yes.
Daily.
Yeah.
Daily.
Yeah.
Daily.
Yeah, it's funny. Growing up, my mom would bring me up there in the afternoons after I got off school.
Sure.
She would pick me up from school, and till about 5, that's where I would hang out and play and do whatever. And there was a period where I decided I wanted to be a writer, and so I would sit there and have conversations. If you can have a conversation with Charlie Portis about writing, you're doing the right thing. You're talking to the right person, and so. So there was a time frame that was my thing, and it was funny that I went away to college, came back, and started managing and working in there more often, and he was just such a he was very into him. He was very introverted and didn't want people to. He didn't want the fame, didn't want people coming in and asking him stuff. And he had his friends, the regulars that came out there, and he sat there, and he would definitely conversate with them and spend time with them. But outsiders and people that weren't in that circle, it was, he was very standoffish. And he was almost intimidating to the point where it's like, I think back, when I was young, that I would have all these conversations that I really don't even remember because I was that young.
Sure.
And then flip to, 10 years ago, and I would be scared to go talk to him just because you didn't want to bother him, because that was his, and it's just funny that
his quiet. When you were a kid, he knew your motivations were pure. You weren't after him because he was a famous guy who wrote, and it was cool to me that they came back out with a second version of True Grit, which just brought him more, hopefully money, obviously, but also recognition for how brilliant he was. And then again, sadly, it took him dying, but he was a Faded Rose regular. I can picture right where he sat, kind of in the middle of the bar there. So we all know, and everybody listening who's into this scene knows, that restaurants are a very fickle, tough, and time-consuming business. The industry stats tell us that more than half of restaurants close within 2 years of opening. And besides your regulars and the consistency of your menu, what would you say are the top factors in the longevity and success of the Faded Rose?
I mean, I think, trying to say besides the consistency, I think that's honestly one of the number one things. I mean, if you don't have a product that somebody walks in is going to know is going to be the same, you're not going to have regulars, and that the consistency breeds regulars. But I think just treating customers and being a customer oriented business, because that's when it comes down to it, you can make the best food in the world, but if you don't treat the customers and make them feel like they want to be there and keep coming back, then that food's only going to take you so far. So I think that's a big part of it is that customer interaction, that neighborhood feel. We've got employees that have been there for 30 years or more.
Which is, again, that speaks highly of how you treat employees as well as customers, because they wouldn't be there if you weren't being good.
Well, they're the top two reasons.
Yeah.
We're not we're not even up to that level as owners.
Right.
We're somewhere below that. Without those two groups.
Yeah. Without
there is no success.
No, that's true. That's true. So, Ed, let's say that, like you, let's just say hypothetically that I had cooked for a lot of friends, and some of them had told me, you really ought to open a restaurant. What would be your advice for me? And don't do it is not really what I'm looking for.
Well, no, I guess the advice would be to do some pre-planning. There's enough literature out there these days. I was fortunate. I came across one book when I was making the decision back in
1981.
80. Yeah, well, it was mid-'81, I guess. Mid-'81.
Right.
And I came across this one book in the library, and I don't think I returned it, as a matter of fact.
You probably owe a fine about it.
But it was a book written by a couple of females that laid out what they did to get started in the restaurant business. And what it comes down to is the only real secret besides good food and treating customers right is paying attention to the numbers.
Sure.
Because they're so marginal.
Right.
If people only knew what it took to get that food on their plate and how small the margin numbers are and why so many restaurants fail. And in my opinion, that's really why they fail.
Right.
And and in the 80s and 90s, that was, the heyday of bigger margins too. You're talking about, nowadays it's minuscule compared to even back then. So, and obviously it was small then. So
yeah, and you just learn how to manage your food cost and manage your labor and manage all the factors. Yeah, well that's great.
And it's,
there's just things you have to control the things you can control, and that's only food cost and labor.
Right.
It's the only two variables that you can deal with. Everything else, you can't control when the air conditioner is going to go out.
Sure.
And it sure in the heck will go out at the most inopportune time.
Exactly.
It's one of those things there, there's there's obviously so many moving parts of the restaurant, with a lot of businesses, you're not creating the product that you're selling.
Right.
So that's when it comes into food costs and you're selling direct to your customers. So your customers are coming to you to purchase it. And, you've got all your vendors and stuff that you deal with, like, Benny Keith and stuff. So you've got those relationships too, which are important. We've had the same, linen service for 20, 30 years.
Right.
We've been with Benny Keith for, decades now. It's becoming partners with these other parts of the business that really does help in that being able to give the service and cost and everything. It all kind of ends up working together. So
well, as I said earlier, we're recording this in late June of 2020, and I didn't even tell you I was going to get to this, but I have covered it with all the recent guests on Heaping Spoonful, which is the COVID-19 pandemic. And for those, I know it varies by state, but really kind of the middle of March is when things ground to a halt here. And then after a certain amount of time, restaurants were given the option of going to curbside delivery or takeout if you let people come in. And then a few weeks ago, we're allowed to begin opening their dining rooms at 1/3 capacity, which now is moved to 2/3 capacity. Just tell me, where do you all plugged in on that continuum, or if you did, and how it went?
So when that all started, it was obviously a shock and one of those things you believe is going to happen until it does. And we made that transition to takeout only. We've always had a healthy to-go business, so we weren't reinventing the wheel. We were just, trying to figure out how to drive a much larger vehicle. And that has some of its, difficulties in and of itself to scale up like that. And so we've kind of stuck to that as far as doing things the way we've done them, takeout wise, just on a larger scale, and move from there. And when we finally got some of the government funding, the PPP loans and stuff like that, we were able to do some renovations that allow us to be able to pay our employees while we were down to do some renovations that we were already scheduled to do in June or July. So we accomplished that, took 30 weeks, closed down, doing some more back of house kitchen, remodeling floors and a new walk-in and stuff. And so we reopened last Monday to take out again. So we kind of were down for a lot of the phase one reopening, but with the size of our building, you're limited to that square footage. There's not much you can do. And so the difference between 33% and 66% isn't that big of a difference to us, because you still have the factor of social distancing and the measurements of between tables and customers. And in those four walls, you can only fit so many 6 feet, so that puts us at, a disadvantage on seating in there. So we're still kind of looking towards the next few weeks, getting a plan together to open the dining room.
Good for you. Yeah, it's tough. And again, I hope this is a question that I won't even have to be bringing up here soon. But, I will see the numbers. We may be done with the virus, but the virus may not be done with us. Mm-hmm. Okay. Well, listen, I thank you guys so much for being our guest today on Heaping Spoonful. You'll see me soon when you get the Faded Rose up and running. I mentioned in my notes that I have on more than one occasion joined my friend Daniel Robinson for lunch on Monday because I could get chicken noodle soup that rocks the house.
We love Daniel.
Yeah, no, he's a loyal customer. And
you bet he is.
He calls me for lunch. I know where we're going, and I asked for the chicken noodle soup day. So listen.
There you go.
All right. Thank you to Zach and Ed David for being our guests on Heaping Spoonful. We appreciate all of you out in podcast land listening to Heaping Spoonful today. Remember, we post new episodes every 2 weeks, so come back soon and enjoy more episodes of Heaping Spoonful. Thank you.
We hope you enjoyed this episode of Heaping Spoonful. On behalf of all of us at Benny Keith Foods, Mid-South Division, please know how much we love connecting you with the legends of the culinary scene and their unique stories. I look forward to the next time we can offer you another Heaping Spoonful.